Hi everybody, welcome back. We're looking at Jeremy Duff, Elements of New Testament Greek. Today we're looking at just one more exercise from the end of chapter 3. This one is from section A among the exercises, and this time we're going to go from English into Greek. Always a little bit harder to go into the language that you know less well, because the language that you go into you need to know more about because you're constructing the sentences from scratch, so to speak. And here's what we're going to look at today, and I want to have a look at this just because it reminds you of some of the slightly trickier things from the previous chapter. So here goes. Their church is seeking the glory of God. Their church is seeking the glory of God. So, well, what do we do this? First up, as always, just try and find the verb. Try and find the verb, and that's very straightforward. Is seeking comes from the verb I seek, which is zeteo. It's a eo verb, epsilon, a weak epsilon at the end of the stem, and so we need to watch the ending slightly. So it's zeto, zetes, zete, zetumen, zetete, zetusin. So that's the verb we're going to need. Now, in order to work out which conjugation of the verb we need, we of course need to know what, whether it's first person, second person, third person, and it's going to be what? Third person. Is it going to be singular though, or plural? And here's where it gets a little bit tricky. You've got their church, which you know, if you remember back to how we discussed writing possessive forms with autos, we want to first gloss this as the church of them. And the reason for just highlighting this is because sometimes people will get confused because they're trying to work out whether this verb is a singular verb or a plural verb. And they think, well, hold on, that's singular, but then that's plural. So which is it that should govern the number of the verb? Should the verb be singular because it's the church, or plural because it's of them? And the way to answer this question is just to discipline yourself to think carefully, what is it that's doing the action? Is it the church that's doing the action, or is it them that's doing the action? And of course it's the church that's doing the action, and so the verb needs to be singular, third person singular. So zeto, zetes, zete, zete, and then we write the church of them, which is he, ek. Oh, hold on, here's me getting my spelling all wrong. Dear, last two videos, mistakes all over the place. Ecclesia. He, ecclesia of them. Now, think for a moment, how do we write of them? Well, of, it needs to be genitive. Them, it needs to be plural. And it's the pronoun, it's the third person pronoun because it's referring to somebody else, whether he or she or it or plural, they or them. So it's going to be autos, but in the genitive plural. So let's start with autos. Autos, auton, autou, auto, singular. Autoi, autus, auton. Auton. Let me get my alphas in something resembling a logical order. There we are. Right. So, he ecclesia auton. Now, again, just pause for a second. You notice that I went straight for the masculine, autos, and then derived auton from that. What would happen if I'd gone for the feminine or the neuter? The answer is, of course, I'd have ended up at the same place because the genitive plural is always the same in masculine, feminine, or neuter in those pronouns. So there we go. The church of them is seeking. And then we've got this little phrase, the glory of God. So what's the object here? Again, you need a little bit of clear thinking to try and work out whether the object is God or glory. And we're talking about the grammatical object here, not, so to speak, the theological object. You might think the church is seeking God by seeking his glory, which is true, but the grammatical object is the glory. And so what are we going to do with this? Well, we're going to find the glory and put it in the appropriate case. The case that we want to put the object in is, of course, the accusative case. So glory is doxa. We decline that. Doxa, doxan. Just carry it on for me. See if you've remembered what you do with nouns, feminine nouns with a s sound before the stem. doxa, doxan, doxes, doxair, doxai, doxas, doxone, doxais. It starts with an alpha ending and then it switches to an air-to ending. So doxa in the dative, doxa in the nominative, doxan in the accusative. Well, it's hair, tan. And notice, just if you would, again, sometimes this confuses people because the ending doesn't look quite the same. That's because we've got one of these slightly unusual feminine nouns that has, at least in nominative and accusative in this case, an alpha-based ending, not an air-to-based ending. So ten doxan, of God. Well, if it's of something, it wants to be in which case? Nominative, accusative, genitive. Genitive wants to be singular. And God is going to come from theos, so it's theos, theon, theu. Theu. So that's of God. Although you remember that typically when using proper names in Greek, much of the time, though perhaps not all the time, in fact certainly not all the time, but at this stage, do it all the time, we also use the article in the same case as the noun itself. So here goes, her ecclesia auton, the church of them, their church. Zerte is seeking, present verb. Ten doxan to theu, the glory of God. Now, just one final thought about this, just to highlight something that's going to be coming up a little bit later in the course, which may interest you and is certainly worth knowing about in advance, just because it's kind of intriguing and it helps you to understand the power of Greek grammar and syntax. Probably if an expert Greek speaker were saying this back in the 1st century, they would have picked up to theu and popped it in here, in what is sometimes known as a sandwich construction. And if you do that, so you get ten to theu doxan, what that does is it serves to unambiguously tell you what the of God belongs with in the sentence. In this case, there's no ambiguity possible really, because it's the glory of God. There's nothing else that's coming after it, nothing else before it, because you get to the verb immediately before it, and there's nothing else that the glory of God could get confused with, so to speak. But I'm sure you can easily imagine a much longer sentence in which you had prepositions, which we're going to come to in chapter 4, and their complements, and then you've got genitive phrases and dative phrases and accusative phrases, and it's not at all clear where the different parts of the sentence fit together and how they latch onto each other, so to speak. Well, to use a sandwich construction like this would serve to unambiguously tell you that it's of God that the glory is. It's the of God glory, the glory of God. And so by putting to theu in here, you would be unambiguously clarifying that. Now, the reason that Jeremy Duff hasn't put this in the answer in the back is because you haven't done it yet, and that's completely fine. There's nothing wrong with it in terms of what you've learned so far, but I wanted just to highlight it for you, because otherwise some sharp-eyed student is going to come back to this video in 5 or 6 chapters time and say, hold on a second, Steve Jeffrey, you didn't tell us that this to theu really belongs in here, which is where it does. In a more sophisticated Greek sentence, it would use that sandwich construction. Okay, well done. We are going to move on in the next video and take a look at chapter 4, where we start to look at prepositions. We'll begin, if you've never come across a preposition in your life, well, you have come across a preposition in your life, you might not realise it yet. We'll begin, I'll give you an introduction to the basic idea of prepositions, then we'll plough on with that chapter, and we'll have some fun together as you're working your way through this. Remember, 20 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day, 5 or 6 days a week, keep working hard, and we'll see you we'll have you reading the New Testament in no time. Okay, God bless, bye for now.